Hello, I'm Phil Clubley. I'm the current chair of the Kinesiology Federation, and as part of our 30th anniversary celebrations, I've been talking with people connected with the Federation and those who've supported us over those 30 years. Today, my guest is Matthew Thie, who will be known in the kinesiology and Touch for Health community through his work as an instructor, but also because his dad, John Thie, was the founder of Touch for Health. Hello, Matthew. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm good. Thanks for bringing me on.
What are things like in America at the moment, restriction-wise? Are things easing, or are you still under any kind of lockdown restrictions?
It's very mixed. You know, we have 50 states, and unfortunately, a lot of it's become politicized.
Mm.
So, but with the vaccine, people are a little bit more confident. Things are opening up a little bit more. Some places are opening up completely all of a sudden, and they say, well, it's self-responsibility. And if people really were taking self-responsibility, then maybe we'd have consistency. But it's a little bit mixed.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I'm still being a little bit careful, and I just found out just this morning that our IKC conference has actually been postponed until next year.
Oh, that's a shame.
The Health Conference in the Netherlands, that I had been wanting to go to last year, has been postponed again.
Wow.
I think we're focusing more on online for the moment.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be where we all are at the moment, doesn't it? So I've been asking my guests what life was like before they discovered kinesiology, but I guess for you, it's been something that's been a part of your life all the time. What was that like in your household? Was it like it was just a normal, ordinary thing, or did it feel like it was special and that there was something going on? How was that for you?
Well, it was both. I mean, in my household, it was just something I grew up with. My father met George Goodheart before I was born. So long as I can remember, I was getting chiropractic adjustments and muscle testing and rubbing those neurolymphatic points. But actually, in my household, it was more conversation was our balancing tool to keep things in harmony in the family and to stay in a good energetic state and feeling good and enjoying life. So my mother was teaching something called effective communication, which is coming from Carl Rogers' client-centered therapy. So it's what you might call person-centered psychology. And she was teaching these basic concepts of just active listening and nonviolent communication, just for any ordinary lay people or teachers or leaders in the business place, of how you can improve your communication skills to actually have a win-win exchange with people. And it's more about not the details of a project, but kind of the emotional, people feeling good about working together. This is the magic that makes things work better. So she was already teaching those workshops, simple things that lay people could learn to make their lives better. And that ended up being the model for the Touch for Health workshop. So my father was big into applied kinesiology and promoting that around the country and then around the world. But he developed Touch for Health on that same model, that there's some simple skills that anyone can learn and apply in their daily lives to make their lives better. So that's what we used more in my family. Most of the time is, how you doing? And let's have a little conversation, feel better. Okay, go ahead, enjoy your life. But as needed, maybe 20% of the time, we'd sit down and do a balance.
Oh, that's amazing. I love the combination of those two things as well, because a lot of my work is that sort of emotional and talking work with them balances attached to that. So that's amazing how those two things sort of came together at that point. That's brilliant.
Yeah, actually, the first Touch for Health workshops were inspired by my father's clients because they were starting to steal his techniques. In other words, he'd rub some points and their neck would feel better, and they'd remember those points and just use them on their own and say, hey, I didn't need to come in again. You know, usually I have to come in every week, but I skipped this session because I could just take care of it myself. But then I felt like, okay, I need some extra help, so they'd come in. He said, uh-oh, I'm going to put myself out of business. And he realized there were a lot of people out there who needed help. So if they were going to be doing it themselves, he should put together kind of a safe program that they could use. And the first workshops before he even put the book together to figure out, okay, what is usable for lay people, what's safe, what's maybe not so easy for them to adapt, was called Health from Within. And really it was about 50% communication skills and 50% muscle testing and reflex points. And it's just over the years that that communication part wasn't the part that's been so emphasized. It's been more the muscle testing, the mechanics of kinesiology and the energy model. But when you get into the Touch for Health instructor training, that's when you see a lot more, there's a lot more emphasis on the communication skills.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I guess Touch for Health then was kind of the family business, you know. Was there like a hope that you would follow in your father's footsteps? Was that something that you wanted to do, or did you want to do something completely different? Did you kind of rebel against it?
Well, actually, I was the third son, so it was a little bit less expectation on me, a little bit less pressure. My older brother, John Francis Thie Jr., had a little bit more pressure to kind of follow in the family footsteps. And the big dream for my father, he had a huge chiropractic clinic with physical therapy and lots of staff and maybe 8 or 9 chiropractors working in the same facility. And so his dream was that his sons would all become chiropractors and they would take over that big business. And my brother did work in various capacities in the clinic. And of course, we all had to do at least one summer in the dungeons of the clinic, filing and learning what were, from the ground up, so to speak, how was that business run? But it was such a huge business and such a huge responsibility. None of us brothers said, well, they said, being a chiropractor is a lot of work. You have to run this giant business with all this staff and you have bookkeepers and front office staff. And no, we don't know. None of us wanted to do that. I realized later, you can be a chiropractor. You don't have to have a huge clinic and all this staff and all of that. And actually, in the last years of my father's practice, when he gave the building, the whole practice over to the chiropractic college, because they were the only institution kind of large enough to inherit it. His dream of passing it on to the partners was too big for any of the partners to take on as he hoped. So he passed that on to the chiropractic college. And the last few years, all he did was do his sessions. He just did his practice. And that was actually the most enjoyable years and the most profitable years of his whole practice.
Oh, amazing. That's fantastic. So what did you go off and do then?
So, well, I kind of learned that lesson. And I said, well, I would prefer to do something more simple. When I was in the university, I did originally want to be in business and computer science because I saw wisely that was the future where you could get rich. And that's certainly the case now. But as it turned out, when I started looking into those classes, and it wasn't my passion. So I ended up, after trying this, that, and the other thing, and coming back from Mexico City from a year abroad, studying in Mexico City, I just said, oh, I can finish an English major in 4 years. And I wanted to finish in the 4 years. So even though my advisor was like, well, you've got studies from all over the place, you could be like a humanities field major. I said, no, I've figured it out. I know exactly what classes I need. English, I'll finish that major. So that was my major. And then when I graduated, I said, well, what kind of job is there for an English major? Of course, I spoke fluent Spanish because I spent a year in Mexico City. So my brother was already teaching in the Los Angeles school district and at a bilingual school. So he said, hey, you should come along here. They have such a shortage of Spanish-speaking teachers. Even though you have no training or experience with children, they'll hire you. So that's what I did.
Oh my goodness. How long did you do that for?
Trial by fire.
How long did you teach for?
Teaching different places around the country, about 9 years.
Oh, wow. And I mean, I guess that was a good groundwork for when you did start running Touch for Health classes.
Yeah, for teaching techniques, I found the last 2 years I was teaching kindergarten, and I found out actually everything that works in kindergarten works pretty good for adults too. And it's kind of in the like the kind, accepting, non-judgmental approach that we try to promote in Touch for Health and kinesiology. You learn that with kindergarten students. It's not really helpful to be judgmental and punishing them all the time. So,
Oh, kids are amazing teachers. So how did you then start moving into Touch for Health and kinesiology?
well, I got to the point in my um, elementary school teaching career where people asked me, "Well, you're about 9 years in. That's one of the cutoff points." Well, first year and the second year, a lot of people say, "Oh, this is not for me," and that's when they leave. And then at about 9 years, you kind of decide, well, am I staying in this for 20, 25 years to get the pension, or am I going to do something else? And I said, well, this has been a great experience, and I loved working with children, but I feel like maybe there's some other things for me to do. And I've done kind of my public service in this low paid but good service job. So I was looking to transition out of that. I was working on some different little creative writing projects of my own. And I had a good friend who was a screenwriter. So I was thinking, oh, that's interesting to me. But then I looked at his job too, which he is very creative and really cranked out a lot of writing. And I realized that was hard work for me. And then on top of it, that's 5% of the job. 5% is the creativity and really coming up with a good story and good solid writing. And then 95% is taking the meetings and selling yourself. And I realized that wasn't for me either. I just wasn't going to dedicate myself. The way I saw him working his butt off to survive, I didn't want to do that. And it so happened at the same time, I was just finishing up, kind of getting ready to transition out of teaching. And I was back in LA, and my father was out here in Malibu. So I came out to see my parents, and he had just gotten a new cappuccino machine. And so I said, hey, let me make you a cafe latte. The strange thing, I never really drank coffee up until the age of 30. Here I am, the age of 30, and my father is corrupting me with this cafe latte. And so I sipped that, and I said, wow, that really is delicious. And he said, yeah, while you're enjoying that, I have this paper here I would like you to have a look at. He slid that also across the table together with the coffee. And so I was enjoying my coffee and reading it. I said, oh, I see what you're getting at here, but I see a few places where this could be polished up a little bit. You could edit it a little bit, punch up a little bit. He said, I was hoping you would say that. So I just sort of backslid into the job by starting out just helping here and there with some little projects while I was still a school teacher. And then after a couple of years of increasing what I was helping with newsletters, and then eventually helping with organizing the different workshops, it just more and more became more of a full-time job. And then after my father passed away in 2005, I kind of picked up what he had been doing with his intensive clinical Touch for Health seminars.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, thank you. So once you sort of found your place in Touch for Health, where did you want to go with that? I mean, you've clearly been an instructor. Did you practice as well, or has it all been about the teaching aspect of that?
Well, yeah, I kind of, like I said, I went into it a little bit backwards. I mean, first of all, yes, it was a family business. So it was kind of a family requirement, like I said, to do some time in the dungeons of the clinic. But on the other side, and you mentioned, was it something special? And I didn't mention the special part. So let me back up to that, because on the one hand, in our family, it was just something normal that we did. But on the other hand, I also knew that other kids and their families didn't necessarily do a lot of this stuff. Chiropractors were not even necessarily accepted as mainstream in my childhood. Lots of my peers told me, well, chiropractor is not a real doctor. I said, okay, yeah, but what he does, it helps me feel good and helps a lot of people. So that's fine. It's not that kind of doctor, not a medical drug doctor. And I didn't fight back with my own bias against drugs and surgery. I just said, okay, it's something different. And then often, we would go along to the annual conference. Way back from 1975 forward, there's been an annual Touch for Health conference in the United States every year, and the show must go on. So even with COVID, we just went to online conferences, never canceled or postponed a conference. So when I would go to the conferences, I was exposed to some very interesting California type people. And also those kind of people from all over the world. It was in the 70s, and really people were really super into hugging. And there were some people who were coming from Germany. I don't know if you've ever heard of or just spoken with Alfred Schatz, but he tells a very funny story about going to the conferences and discovering all these new ideas about energy and muscle balancing. But it wasn't really his culture to be hugged by everybody. So he used to always look for, is there an open window after the lecture? Can I just climb out there and escape all those hugs at the door? Because he actually had hug monitors at the door that make sure everyone would get at least 10 hugs a day. That was sort of considered the minimum.
That's brilliant, because I came from a background where we did not do hugging, and when I started getting into kinesiology and conferences, and you go to workshops and everyone was hugging, it was you're kind of all rigid being hugged, and it's I love hugging now. And as I've grown into hugging, we're not allowed to touch anybody or even make eye contact with anyone these days. But yeah, hugging's amazing once you get into it.
So I'd go along to the conferences, and I'd sit in on some of the lectures, but mostly it was go to the pool or, see because it was a lot of times in San Diego in the early days. So that's a good beach town. So we'd go to the beach, or even sometimes my father would schedule instructor training in Hawaii during the colder months in California. So, that would mean a week or two at the beach in Hawaii for me. So that was pretty special. Is
that how you picked the venues?
Yeah, partly, sure. And then when I was around 12, I went along to my first instructor training, which was actually my first formal workshop of any kind, kinesiology workshop. But, I was pretty familiar with things from learning it at home. So it wasn't so much over my head, although at 12, I had my 12-year-old understanding of things. And that was held at a ranch in Northern California, which was clothing optional. So actually, I was relieved that in class, people actually did wear their clothes. It was just by the pool and at the hot tub in the evenings that people decided not to wear clothes. This is, still into the 80s, but kind of a special time even in California. And then it was later on that I took another instructor training when I was 21, and I had a little bit more intention that I might be teaching classes, but I was pretty busy just with my day job of teaching school. So then once my father lured me back into getting involved, I was writing first just from my own, everything he had told me growing up. And then I said, well, I should be writing some from my own experience here. I know all these things are true, but I haven't necessarily experienced these in my own one-on-one sessions, and I haven't really been teaching formally the workshops. So that's when I started formally teaching the workshops, not till I was 30-ish.
Okay.
And that was still more towards, some book projects, newsletters, more the writing and the publicity aspect, which I thought would maybe be more my skill set. But as things went forward, I enjoyed the teaching more than the publicity part. And still to that day, my strong point is the teaching, not the publicity part so much. But as part of the family job was to go to the conferences and speak at the conferences. So when I first started speaking at the conferences, I had the idea, wow, I'm going to have to start finding out what is the cutting edge, what is the latest fancy technique, and what's the new exciting thing. And when I got to the conference, I said, oh, that's what everybody else is doing. They're coming up with the new thing. And I also noticed all those new things had almost nothing to do with Touch for Health. It was a Touch for Health conference, and my father and I seemed to be the only ones talking about Touch for Health. So I said, oh, I think I have a career for the rest of my life just talking about Touch for Health. I'm just going to come back and remind people about the same old tried and true pearls of wisdom, basics of Touch for Health that never stop being cutting edge.
Oh,
So
that's amazing, because I think we do sometimes wander a bit away, and it is good to be brought back to those fundamentals, you know, because they work. They're incredibly valuable. So I know when I was reading your notes earlier on, I sort of talk about the transformation in kinesiology and when people have really big shifts and things. But I think you're more of a mind that it's a supportive therapy. Is that right? Are you thinking along the lines of people sort of having it regularly to maintain health and to keep them in a balanced place, rather than maybe having sessions every now and again when they're struggling with something?
Well, of course, I think it's most powerful when you use it. So
Yes.
again, we can have the most fancy technique. It's only as good if you use it, if you do it. So the really simple things, sometimes they're the best technique because you can do it. And you could even do it every day. And it's not going to hurt you to do it in the morning and the night and when you feel like you're under stress. And if you make it a habit, a practice that you do it every day, whether you need it or not, like brushing your teeth, because it feels good, not because you have any problem with your teeth that you're trying to fix, then even when you're under stress, oftentimes all of our tools just go right out the window when we're under stress. But if it's a practice, we remember, oh yeah, I have my tools. I feel a little bit nervous right now in this interview. So I can do something to center my left brain and right brain and get a little bit more grounded and get my mind back under control, hear my own thoughts. So I think that's one of the main powers. Of course, if you do that on an ongoing basis, I do think it's transformative. Which direction your life path goes on changes a lot when you have these tools to cope with stress and stay in your center and, you know, get in touch with what is it that you want in life? What is your passion? And do something to reinforce that every day. If you're coming from a place of enthusiasm for your life, it transforms your life, your experience of life, and therefore what your life is. But also, you know, I have one of my privileges of being in this family and this work is that I work with a lot of people who want to become instructors, or they take the instructor training because they want to really be in that educational mode in their practice, seeing patients one-on-one. And so I'm very, very familiar with the common story of people who come into this work and want to practice it, either if it's just being expert with their families and friends, or as instructors, or as practitioner, or all of those things. It's very common that they've come with some problem, some issue, and that they have had some huge transformation in their life. And when I'm working with people in sessions, when we do the clinical intensives, that's kind of more my practice. It's workshop and practice at the same time. So we're doing a lot of authentic sessions in the workshop as we teach all the skills. So you see a lot of the practical application, not just kind of the dry ABCs of a technique. And so you see, oh, this is how it works. These are the procedures, but here's the kind of results you can see real time. And here's how we can play with it and adapt it also. So it's a kind of a lot of people coming to those workshops, they're coming to learn a skill, but they're also, it's so much of the time I have that privilege of just being there at the moment to witness them turning that corner. I can't say I'm the one who created that transformation. I caused that, but oftentimes I'm there at that turning point. And yes, I can provide a hand up. I can provide non-judgmental support that helps maybe as a catalyst to help that shift happen.
Absolutely.
So much of the time, the story of the people who get passionate about this work, it's a transformation they've experienced for themselves. And so that's what keeps their passion going. They want to share it with other people because it's totally real for them. But for me in my life, it's not always been so many dramatic things as it's been, like you said, just kind of an ongoing tool. And sometimes I do forget about it for a week or a month at a time. I say, I haven't even had a balance for a month. And if I feel fine, then I just kind of go about my business. But if I say, you know, I am a little bit out of balance and maybe emotional side, or my knee hurts, and then I say, Claudia, come over here. My wife, Claudia, being part of the family, she went through the whole instructor training also. It wasn't really her thing to want to teach Touch for Health classes, but she knows how to do all of it, so we can get together in the home in the original tradition, and so we
Brilliant.
can do our balancing. So on an as needed basis, I can get the balance. The other thing is, you mentioned I was a school teacher, worked with small children, and you can apply a lot of those lessons to the adult education scenario, but it also really transforms the experience as an educator, because teaching these classes, people are coming hungry for this information. And you get that privilege of just seeing, even if it's just a small change, but they see there's hope. I had this pain and it's decreased some. And if it can decrease some, maybe later it can decrease more. It's so enjoyable. It's so satisfying. And as a teacher, you know, the people are really interested in what you have to teach. You don't have to do the crowd control and the policing. Well, maybe a little bit. People are people. There can be personality conflicts in a class. We also have tools to work with that. But it's just so enjoyable. And as you mentioned, you know, like when I was a kid, my father would schedule the classes, the locations based on what's an interesting location. And it's just been so wonderful for me to have been invited to all these different places around the world, more places than I could actually ever go. But we go to as many as we can, from Japan to Russia to South America. The only place I haven't stepped foot yet is Africa.
Okay.
I have been invited to South Africa. It's on my agenda, but right now I'm not going anywhere. That's also been, in a way, a transformation of how I work as an educator, and just kind of transformation of my life. I was always enjoyed traveling, and I saved my money, even my little money as a teacher, so that on the off time, that's one of the great luxuries of a school teacher. You have a lot of holiday time. So on the off time, I could go traveling. But at a certain point, I felt like traveling just for the sake of being a tourist wasn't quite satisfying. So being able to go and share Touch for Health different places and enjoy the beauty and the culture of all the different places, and see that this work, it works across cultures in different you know, age groups, languages. Yes, there are some little nuances and translations. Things change from culture to culture. Certain things we have to adopt, but it's really amazing. It's real, because I can see over generations, all these years, and all these different places in the world, people find this same value in the work.
That's incredible. I mean, I was going to ask you at some point, you know, whether you're still enthusiastic about what you do, and you clearly are. You know, I'm getting sort of bowled along by your enthusiasm. What keeps you enthusiastic about it? I mean, can you even pinpoint it?
Well, it's funny you say bowled over, because while my father was still alive, you know, I worked with him last 9 or so years of his life kind of more directly, even though I was always in pretty good touch with him. If I was ever in town, I had to get a balance. He was so enthusiastic. For me, as a little bit more of an introverted person, I actually found it sometimes quite overwhelming. And so, and you know, I got the Touch for Health lectures in the home so many times. You just press a button right here and the entire lecture will come out. So, which is good. But sometimes maybe I can bowl people over now, because they ask just a small question and they get a whole lecture, because it's just automatic. Oh, on that topic, this lecture. But over the years, you know, I really am still more of an introvert person. So I kind of recharge by having quiet time, alone time. It's nice that I'm in Malibu now. I can go walk on the beach, which was actually something my father used to love to do. But he was the kind of guy who recharged by being out, gregarious with the public, speaking in front of the public. And so I've slowly, over the years, I have learned to also, you know, develop that extrovert style, and more tolerate to have a capacity to be so enthusiastic about things, because it wasn't really my nature. When I find myself getting very excited, I need to calm down a little bit. It's a little bit overwhelming for my system. We had a workshop in Taiwan a year or so back, which actually, that's a really beautiful country to visit. We were amazed. And the group there was super enthusiastic. And we taught a little workshop that was just like to highlight, you know, a topical workshop to highlight aspects of Touch for Health. And it was called Fun with Posture and Reactivity. So it's just a review of posture, observing the posture and reactivity, which a lot of people seem to have reactivity to the theme of reactivity. They're stressed out by it for some reason. It's like salsa dancing, you know, there's a couple of fancy steps you got to learn, but once you get it down and you get the rhythm, it's actually a lot of fun. And then you can add all kinds of fancy moves. But a lot of people are intimidated. They just don't do it because it's just, they don't get the rhythm right away. And so they're stressed out. So then if they're stressed, then they don't want to do it. So I wanted to do something that's more fun and stress-free, and so people can see, oh, it's not that complicated, and it really can be a lot of fun. And in the moment, that particular technique, when nothing else works, that has sometimes amazing results. A pain that you've had been bothering you for 30 years, do this one time, maybe you never have that pain again. So it's worth knowing that particular procedure. But these guys were so enthusiastic and had so much fun. They have probably my favorite 14 muscle dance I've ever seen, with choreography to popular music and cool moves. But I was getting overwhelmed. It was just too much fun for me. Several times I had to sit down and just breathe and do ESR to kind of get back to my center.
Oh my goodness. So there are as many ways of describing kinesiology as there are branches of kinesiology. Do you have a way that you describe it, you know, that can help people understand it a bit more than maybe they do?
Yeah, well, I guess it comes back a little bit to me being a little bit of a private person by nature. So when people ask you, what do you do? My tendency is to give them as little information as possible. And if they seem interested, then I'm happy to tell them. I have a lot of information I can give them, but I like to give them in little tiny spoonfuls and see if they're really interested. I'm the kind of person, I don't enjoy a conversation that's one way and somebody's lecturing to me without any indication that I want to hear what they have to say. So I'll say little bits at a time, and as I see that there's interest, then I'll fill in what they're interested in. And so if I can get a little idea where they're coming from, oh, are you an acupuncturist? Have you heard of chiropractic? Do you know about massage therapy? You know, what is their orientation that they relate to? Okay, now I can see what we're doing, how does that fit with what they already are familiar and comfortable about. If I say, oh, have you heard of acupuncture? And I see kind of strange look on their face, I say, well, we don't do that. But we use some of the acupressure points that helps balance the muscles, but then I move on to the structural part. Maybe they're going to be more comfortable with, you know, muscles. The muscles are real. And, you know, if you feel stronger and things function on a structural, you know, then, oh, okay, yeah. So I see what seems to fit for that person, then we go from there. But as soon as possible, and this is what my father used to always do, I'd say, well, let's try it out. Try it, you'll like it. You know, just stick out your arm and let me see if you can feel any of this subtle difference using muscle testing. We're going to check not really if your muscle's strong or weak. I'm sure if it's an arm wrestling, you'll win the arm wrestling. But just if you can feel the subtle shifts in energy when we do different things with the muscles or emotions or energy. And a lot of people think it's pretty fun and fascinating. So I just try to give them an experience. And then as they're interested, I can explain some of the theory. But I want to focus more on what's the benefit. So do you have a pain somewhere? You know, what's the number on the pain? Okay, now let's check what's going on with those muscles. And I rub this point. Oh, that's a little bit tender there. Yeah, you can say stop anytime, but oh, hey, what happened to that pain? That's what I do. Well, what is that? Well, I can explain to you, but it's better we just do the procedure. And if you're really interested, we can do a workshop and you can learn to do that yourself. Of course, if you don't want to learn to do it, you're welcome to come along. I'll give you a session and you can just pay me for that. And you can come as many times as you like. In my father's practice, he used to see 50 to 70 clients per day.
Wow. So
a session with Matthew Thie was a 5-minute session, actually. But he did a little bit of a goal setting, 14 muscle balance, chiropractic adjustment in that time, and got high client satisfaction and great results in that time frame. But when he retired, he said, you know, that was a lot of hard work to work that fast, work with that many people. So he said, what would be my favorite way to work? How would I enjoy it? Because he got bored in retirement. He thought maybe he'd just sit out in the country and watch his grandchildren ride horses or something. And he said, no, I want to use my hands, but what would be the most enjoyable for me? So he said, well, actually what I'd like to do is take people to the mountaintop for a retreat outside of their normal everyday life, so they can just really get out of that and just focus on what is it that they want in life, what might be blocking them, what might be out of balance that we can help put into balance, and give them all the tools so they can have that transformational experience, but also take it with them to use in their life.
So did that go from like a 5-minute session to a 5-week session?
Yeah, well, it went from, if you wanted a session from John Thie, it would be like 5 minutes. Then once he retired, if you wanted a session with John Thie, it was 5 days. But it was many small sessions as he taught the information. So it was still actually in his clinical sessions, when he had a session as a demonstration of a particular technique, they were still pretty short, even though it would almost always include a goal setting, and he would go pretty deep with the goal setting. Working on digging up we did a few home movies of those. So it's not real high quality video, but the audio's on there. It could be interesting. We'll see if we can share some of those. But
yeah,
in a very short space of time, he did a pretty deep and thorough balance.
It's incredible. Have you any advice for people who do run clinics, whether they're full-time practitioners or they're just starting out? Do you have, I mean, obviously your father's incredibly successful. You know, do you have any advice to share for people who are working in a clinic environment?
Well, my father used to say, actually, for people to be successful using Touch for Health or basic kinesiology as a professional, they really only needed the basics of Touch for Health level 1 and then 1 year of marketing classes. So in his practice, you know, if it's a 5-minute session, he's not doing all kinds of complicated different things, although here and there he might bring things in. He had to be very, very simple, but he found it was very powerful doing simple things. And in his retirement, he really didn't do the chiropractic adjustment, even though that was the core of his practice as a chiropractor. He found just 14 muscle balance and a few more muscles here and there, and dealing with goals and emotions. The spine would pretty much naturally come into alignment. It wasn't so necessary to do chiropractic adjustment. So he really encouraged people, you know, this way of working works. So you can be confident in that. So just trust the process and practice, practice, practice. My parents often talked about the 3 Ps. The first 3 Ps, I don't know who invented this. I don't think they did, but it's a great pearl of wisdom I'll pass along. The 3 Ps are, first of all, you get into perfectionism. I got to be perfect before I can practice on anybody. And then because you want to be perfect, you'll procrastinate. Well, I got to study more and I got to study more. And at some point I'll be worthy to touch another human being, try to help them come into better balance. So you procrastinate, and you procrastinate so long you become paralyzed. And even to this day, I sometimes fall into those 3 Ps on certain presentations I'm going to make, or something, some workshop I'm working on developing. So I try to remember the other 3 Ps. Practice, practice, practice. Just do it, knowing it will never be perfect. There will always be faults. But if you do, go ahead and do it, then you can go back and see, well, what worked, what didn't, and improve on it. So practice, practice, practice. You'll always be improving. And if you keep practicing, you'll get very good and very confident at what you're doing. And that confidence is going to add to the effectiveness of the work, because people are going to feel that confidence, so they're going to believe in what you're doing. It's not that you have to believe in it, but if people feel safe and confident, it really adds to the benefit of the work. So,
yeah, absolutely.
You know, some people really love to study 3 years and professional degree, and that's awesome, but it's still the same principle. You might come out of all that study and then say, well, how do I start a practice? I have all these skills, but how do I teach anyone? So I think you have to get, first of all, in touch with that confidence that what you're doing, what you're offering is of great value. And so get past your own ego about it and know, well, I have this mission to share this, whether people love me or they don't love me, or they reject me or they accept me. I'm just going to try to share this with as many people as I can. And how could I do that? So the work itself is great. It's proven over 50 years, tried and true. The whole ABCs of kinesiology is a wonderful universe of things to help people. But it's very common in our field. Some people, they have that natural charisma. There's the Donna Eden. There's so many people out there who, they just had that enthusiasm. And so everybody they touched told all their friends. And so they got more busy than they ever wanted to be just because of natural demand. And so that's a certain percentage of the people who are successful in the field. They just have that charisma. They just do it, and that's it. They have to like raise their prices and make their waiting list longer to try to reduce the overload. And as you might know, when they increase their prices, people value their service more, and they have an even longer waiting list. And then there's other people who maybe they don't have that natural charisma per se, but they're willing to be outgoing, gregarious, maybe not try to preserve part of their life as a private person. They say, I'm just a kinesiology guy. And everyone they meet, everywhere they go, at the supermarket, their friends, their family, whoever, I'm the kinesiology guy. Hi, good morning, nice weather. And I'm the kinesiology guy. You know about kinesiology? Look, my t-shirt, kinesiology. Here's my card. In the line, you're waiting at the supermarket. Of course, nowadays you can't do this because you have to stay 6 feet apart. But in the old days, in the before time, while you're waiting in the line at the grocery store, you might notice somebody with some posture and you say, well, I notice you look like maybe you have a little pain in your neck right there. Let's do some gentle movements. While we're waiting, let's do some acupressure and see if that feels better. Does that fit? Yeah, here's my card. So that's the Johnny Appleseed approach, you know. Norma Harnack, who's one of our instructor trainers, has been for many years. She shared that with me. We co-taught an instructor training one time. That's one of the recommendations she had. You know, have your spiel ready, your 2-sentence spiel, like you said. How do you explain kinesiology? Have your 2-sentence explanation ready. Have your elevator speech ready, and tell everybody you ever meet. That's not really my approach because I'm a little bit more private sometimes. And so I'll just give them a little bit of information. If interested, then yes, I have my spiel ready. I have my speech, Touch for Health. It's a system of balancing your posture, attitude, and energy. It relieves pain, releases stress, helps you function optimum, activates the natural healing system, and you can enjoy your life. You can say that's not 2 sentences, but it fits in a short phrase. And then if they're interested in any of those things, if their eyes don't glaze over, then I can explain. Or they say, what do you mean? Well, it's weird. Let's try it out. So then, of course, a lot of people, none of those things are fit for their personality, how they want to work. So, but the beauty is there's other people who aren't into doing the work, the hands-on work, the kinesiology, but they're really good at promoting. They're really good at publicity. They have a facility. They're happy to bring in different people and sponsor them. And you do some kind of financial arrangement where they do all the publicity and you just show up and teach. And, you know, like massage therapists, some put out their own shingle and they do their own independent massage therapy, but a lot of them find places where people hire them to do that work. So that was one of my father's dreams, that on every corner there'd be a Touch for Health shop. So that, you know, people who have this skill, there'd be a facility, they can go and share the skills, and the people who need it could show up and get what they needed very easily without having to search on the internet and find somebody. So there are more and more schools around the world, and like well-established schools. So to that extent that some of the dream has come true, and people setting up their kinesiology practice. So that's kind of, yeah, there are some of those kinesiology shops, but to be successful at that, you may need to invest in the person who's good at selling your service. Yes. But have the confidence that it's a great service. And no, first of all, I think this is what I should have started with. The first advice my father would give to people: find out if this is your passion. Yeah. And the Touch for Health is such a great way to start, because you start out practicing touching people and listening to them and feeding back how they feel and what would you like better, and, you know, being empathetic, and then supporting them in self-responsibility without judgment, no giving advice. Some people, that chokes them to not give advice, and no judgment, and have to touch people and listen to them. Not for me. I want to do something else. Okay, good. You know that. So don't go into the healing arts. Don't go into the helping professions, because you're going to be miserable. Don't get, My father used to say $100,000 debt for medical school. That's very laughable. Now that's for almost any university education now. It's insane, but that's the case. Don't get that huge debt, go all the way through all those years of medical training to find out you hate working with smelly, complaining, sick people. You know? So if you find out it's not your passion, then just don't do that. Do something else. Maybe you're the promoter. You believe in the work, but you don't want to do that. So okay, great. Find all those people and create that way that they can succeed, but you can also succeed in your way. What's your talent?
That's brilliant. Thank you. That was fantastic. You know, I'm going to be coming on to the Pearls of Wisdom, but I feel we've had several oysters full of Pearls of Wisdom. I mean,
I've been shucking oysters my whole life.
So it is our 30th anniversary. We're very excited, and we've been asking our guests for a pearl of wisdom or two. And I know when we were talking earlier, you have quite a list of pearls, which is brilliant. Do you want to share one of those, all of those? What do you fancy?
This year with the different conferences going on, there's this Nolative platform, and they have their second online conference coming up, and their theme is roots and innovation. And it reminded me of a theme we had years ago in Malibu when I was actually the conference chair, which is not my favorite job to do. That committee work is not really my passion, although I really respect the people who do that. It's needed work. But our theme was roots, essence, and vision of Touch for Health. So when they said innovation, roots and innovation, it reminded me of that. I said, oh yeah, I got some ideas I could share on that. So I kind of already had in mind, well, what are the essential pearls of wisdom that we want to preserve and pass on to the next generation? And our Touch for our annual conference, I think it's something like the 49th consecutive annual conference in the United States that we'll be having this year. It's online, and it's actually in teaming up with Nolative. The theme is legacy of light. So also, like, what is light, and what is the legacy? Where does it come from? What are those roots? And what do we want to pass on? You know, what is the legacy that we're passing on to the next generation, whether through our own family, our own children, or through this wider family of kinesiology around the world. So I already kind of was on that idea, thinking about the roots and who are the people, what are the pearls that they've passed on to me, and what I want to pass on to next generations, that I really think 7 generations on, these are going to be valuable things that people preserve. So for me, it starts with George Goodheart and some of the pearls I picked up over the years from stories of George, and even a couple of times I saw him speak publicly as an adult. Yeah, I never had a chance. Well, I mean, I'm sure I had a chance, but I was just a child really when my father was more involved with George Goodheart. And when he met George, he was fascinated with what he was doing, but he didn't quite get it right away. It was show and tell, and it was awesome what he was doing, but my father didn't know about muscle testing. He didn't know about Chinese medicine. He didn't know about any of these acupressure points. It was all new stuff. And the kind of results he was getting as a chiropractor with applied kinesiology was something different. He was really, John Thie was definitely believed in chiropractic and was very important in promoting the chiropractic profession, even before AK. But when he saw what George Goodheart was doing, he said, this is something different, and I need to know about this stuff. So he followed George around wherever he was speaking and said, hey, how can I help you? I want to learn what you're doing. George said, yeah, you can run the projector. So that's how he started out, just seeing how could he be an assistant to George. And then he said, George, we can organize workshops. We need to get this out. He had the California Chiropractic Association invite George out to California many times to teach chiropractors and other physicians to use the AK work. So in the course of that, traveling around, teaching workshops, and then eventually my father was the founding chairman of the International College of Applied Kinesiology. So he's also involved in organizing and, you know, finding out what is a legacy, documenting that, and what are we going to pass on to the next generations. This is such good work. We need to make sure it's, even after we're not around, George Goodheart, John Thie, what is going to be, there's going to be something here, an institution to pass this important information along. So I met George Goodheart a few times as a child, and he seemed like a really nice grandfatherly type guy as far as I was concerned, but I didn't really have any deep conversations. I didn't glean any pearls at that time. But as an adult, I did see him speak a couple of times. But more than that, I heard so many legends about him as I went along through the years. Of course, mostly from my father, but from other people too, who just told these hilarious stories about George Goodheart, because he was such an innovator. And I believe also, you know, he was one of those guys who was just a gifted healer. He had the golden hands and the golden touch. And so just people being around him felt better. He had that charisma. But he also was a funny guy. He also was always telling jokes. He was always very lighthearted. So in his speeches, they were always peppered with all these very humorous turns of phrases. So it was really enjoyable to hear a George Goodheart lecture because it was always punctuated with all these laugh lines. So one of the pearls of wisdom that I've gotten secondhand first, and then from George Goodheart himself when I heard him speak a couple of times as an adult, was he said, measure, measure, and measure again. And I wasn't really sure exactly what he meant or why you did that, but I figured he had all kinds of measuring tapes and devices. And when in my father's clinic, they had this special thing you could put on. I think I have one here somewhere, left over from my father, where you can measure the precise degrees of how far the neck is turning. So then if you've done something and something's changed, you can notice even down to even 1 degree. 1 degree. That's an improvement. Wonderful. There's hope for you. So and my father used to talk about, he was really inspired by some different research he read about in pain control, that if you do the analog scale, even though it's not necessarily an objective measure that you can measure and document there's been a change, but with pain, there's no objective scale. The scientific measure for pain, like emotion, is what you feel, your subjective feeling. And so putting a number on it, 0 to 10, how it is for you, your truth, is I believe, actually powerful in itself. Just getting in touch with it, listening to yourself, seeing what's going on with yourself. Because by suppressing those things, we often have to suppress emotion and pain just to get through the day. So that's helpful for survival, but it sometimes kind of perpetuates and exacerbates whatever that is. And just getting in touch with it and seeing it sometimes helps to already start releasing it. But then after you've done something to help improve and you measure again, measure again, even if it's a small change, the fact that you notice there's a change has actually a huge impact on having some hope and some belief that what you've done has been of value. So you actually reinforce the benefit and keep the benefit going instead of discarding it and kind of stopping the benefit that's happened. And apparently the statistical studies show it doesn't matter what technique you're using. If you measure before and you measure after, the technique will work better. So that actually the measuring might be the most important technique.
That's brilliant. That's fantastic. Yeah, very useful.
I'm not entirely positive that's exactly what George Goodheart meant when he said that, but that's the lesson I've learned through contemplating that and observing how people apply that and my own experience, that, yeah, it makes a big difference.
Yes.
And if I didn't measure at the beginning, okay, but measure at the end, because that's the next best time to do it. And even if they didn't make a precise measure at the beginning, they can think back and say, well, what number was it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there has been some change. Because if you just have pain before and pain after, it feels like nothing happened. But if it's a 9 pain before and an 8 after, hey, that's 10% improvement. That's something.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Is drill finger, is that another George Goodheart?
The drill finger, well, I said he was called Dr. Golden Hands, but drill finger was another nickname that he had. In fact, the day that my father met George Goodheart, and in the intensive workshops my dad used to teach, he always used to start out with that story. I got most of this stuff from George Goodheart, and here's the story of how I was first exposed to it. When I was going into the lecture hall, because I'd read an article and I was fascinated in what he was talking about, this applied kinesiology stuff, somebody tapped me on the shoulder and he said, hey, are you going to see the next speaker? And He said, yeah, you should go see him. He's great. He's doing this great stuff. He said, yeah. I am the next speaker. So when you go in there, please sit in the front and raise your hand and volunteer, because you've got something I want to work on and demonstrate my technique. I think you'd be perfect. Well, what is it? No. I don't want to tell you what it is. I don't want to spoil it. Just sit in the front and volunteer, and I'll show it. Okay. He was a gregarious, outgoing, extrovert guy. Great. I'd love to sit in the front and be up and experience it. You know how that is. Some of us are afraid to ever be the demonstration and a workshop, but some people love to get the demo session. They've had a demo session from every kinesiologist under the sun. But anyway, so he went up there, and first of all, he had my father stand up in front of the group and, do the 3/4 turn so people could observe his posture. And AK, they're really observing the posture. And everyone in the crowd said, oh yeah, we see what's going on there. And he said, well, what is it? Don't worry. Lie down on this table. And it was this hard banquet table. I don't even know if they had a tablecloth over it. It wasn't a nice cushiony massage table like we use now, but it was this hard banquet table. Laid him down on there and proceeded to drill into his chest right around here, like he wanted to drill all the way through to the table below. And oh wait, I got a little ahead of myself. So because part of the point is that George Goodheart was a funny guy. Funny guy, though, sometimes can be interpreted different ways. But at first, when he tested, he had to test the muscle first. So he tested the muscle, and his head banged into this hard table, and it made this echo all through the auditorium. And then my father said, oh, wait, I wasn't ready. My neck isn't weak. You just caught me off guard. So he said, okay. And he put the microphone right next to his head. And my father said, oh, that's nice. He's putting the mic so people can hear when I'm ready. So he said, are you ready? He said, yes, I'm ready. And he banged his head into the table again, and through the microphone was this loud echo. And all the people were, ha, 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 so funny. A little bit weird, that chiropractor humor. But anyway, after that, then he proceeded to do the drill finger. And then his neck was so easy to hold up, and his shoulders felt more relaxed. And they said, hey, now look, he showed the audience, do you see the difference? They said, yeah, he had a high shoulder, and that high shoulder had come back into balance. So my dad said, I don't know what he did, but I want to learn how to do that, because that made such an immediate difference. And he didn't even crack my neck. So that's where in AK, the neurolymphatic points, they really work the dickens out of them. They can be very, very firm about it. My father used to say, hey, I'm going to do it real firmly. You can say stop anytime. You just got to know the magic word and just say stop anytime. And you can bark like a dog or make any noises you want or move your leg, and I'll keep rubbing. But if you say stop, then I'll stop. So we had a very expressive dance doing neurolymphatic points. I might be trying to get away, and he'd grab me and hold on to me and rub in there. But until I said stop, he'd keep going. And sometimes that's also the way George Goodheart worked. And Walter Schmidt, I don't know if you've ever heard his name. He's still today a big name in applied kinesiology and functional medicine. But he always told jokes while rubbing the neurolymphatic points to distract people, so he could get in there at least a good 30 seconds of neurolymphatic points before they said stop. So, and it was just always my father's go-to reflex of all the different reflex, because he saw such dramatic reduction in pain so immediately, whether it's pain on the muscle test or pain, any muscular pain especially. Just the first would circuit locate which reflex to use, just go straight to neurolymphatics, because most of the time that had a great benefit. So that to me also, if I'm going through a balancing, and I might nowadays, I do balances with just words, just metaphor balances. But if somebody has some pain while we're going through, I usually stop and do some neurolymphatics, because it's just so much juice in the neurolymphatics and has such great results. But I've found you don't have to be total drill finger. You can actually do it quite gently and get pretty much all the same results. It might take a little bit longer, but you can do it for longer if you're not really trying to drill all the way through the person's body. And so, of course, in self-responsibility and Touch for Health, we really provide a lot of opportunity for people to figure out, well, what is the most, it might still be some discomfort because you're looking for the tender points, but comfortably uncomfortable within what's acceptable to them. So I prefer to rub it themselves. Or we do have the chicken switch. You can hold the point. Let's see, maybe hold this point, stomach point, and hold the end point of the meridian. You know that one? You just hold.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to massage firmly on the neurolymphatic point, and you can still get the benefit. And there's this idea in Chinese medicine of the Ashi points. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that exactly right, but I think I get the sentiment. The meaning behind it is where you find that magical pain, that's the point to work. And so you can work all those acupuncture points very firmly, very painfully, and they're not too worried traditionally about whether that's painful or not. They don't ask you if you want to stop. They just dig away in there. But, the way we work with the acupressure holding points, you could also work with those points, maybe not even physically touching, just tuning into the energy. And sometimes you get a deeper, better result.
Yeah. Good stuff.
I mentioned in Chinese medicine, forgive my mispronunciation, but I think the spirit is there. The Ashi points, where it hurts, work there. But there's an opposite principle also in Chinese medicine, and George Goodheart would say, where it hurts is where it ain't. Where you have the tension and pain is probably not the problem. So the obvious symptom that's presenting and the problem that we might want to whack down with medication and drugs and your shoulder hurts? Well, let's just cut your shoulder off. That should solve the problem, right? So he found out right away when he started testing muscles and palpating the muscles and finding sore points and rubbing and what's going on here? Let me check them. Let's measure again. What? It changed. Total change in function. I thought that muscle was weak or paralyzed. I just felt up the muscle a little bit with permission in a respectful way. And there was a change. So that's the beginning of applied kinesiology. And what he found is most of the time that where the tension is, where there's spasm, he said, if you find a muscle in spasm all by itself without influence of some other factor, you should have a special Mexican fiesta and really celebrate because it's so rare you found this unicorn. He said, most of the time where that pain is, what the symptom is, that ain't the problem. So you need to find the other holistically where other things are out of balance and find out how you can bring things into a balance. And so that was the opposing muscle theory, and why in Touch for Health, we don't focus so much on inhibiting over energy or weak, relaxing tight muscles, but we look for where are the muscles that are switched off. We switch those off, and then naturally the tension tends to naturally release, or maybe then we go back and if we work on that tension, it's going to melt like butter. So there's that principle. You can work directly where the issue seems to be, or sometimes work farther away, maybe even the farthest point away for pain control, and do the most gentle, simplest, most minimal thing to get some benefit. And that will be the most tolerable thing for the body to come into a harmony, rather than like whacking the side of the TV set and see what you knock loose.
Perfect. So have you got another one for us?
I got another one for you. Another thing, George Goodheart, and it's kind of related to that same story. So it flows on from when he first started working with muscles, he didn't have this expectation. George Goodheart did not have the expectation that he would change how muscles functioned in the moment. He said, I can see a deviation in the posture. There's something, muscles aren't even. There must be some strong muscles and weak muscles, but he thought that was in a more of a static idea. So he said, well, we'll exercise the weak muscles, develop their strength so they balance out the overdeveloped muscles, and then eventually we'll balance the posture and the spine, and then you'll feel fine. We found right away muscles could behave as if they were weak, but not be weak. He would palpate them because, old school chiropractor, you palpate, you feel everything, and feel what's going on. I think he wasn't feeling just different levels of the physiology and the muscle and the fascia, but I think he had a very sensitive touch to that. But I think he was really tuning in a lot to the energy at the same time, the intuition. And so one of the first cases, a famous story in his book, and other people tell it, I often tell it in my Touch for Health classes, he was working with a guy on his anterior serratus muscle because he felt like that might be related to a winging scapula. Scapula was winging out here. You could see it different, asymmetrical. So he said, well, I think from the textbook, Kendall and Kendall, Kinesiology, Muscle Testing and Function, this anterior serratus might be involved. So stick your arm out here and just push on the wall and let's see what's going on. As you do that pushing, what's going on with your scapula? And you would see that scapula was not stable. So he said, okay, let me pull down on the arm and see right side and left side. And compared to one side to the other, that muscle seemed to be very weak. So then he palpated the muscle and then pushing on it, it seemed to recover its full strength. And then he said, well, let's do the test where you push on the wall. And the guy had recovered so much strength, he knocked over the partition between the two examining rooms. He said, okay, you're much better now. And the guy said, well, why didn't you do that before? And Goodheart said, well, these things take time.
Have you got a pearl of wisdom of your own? I know you must have.
Well, I mean, that's a humorous retort, but I think there's a pearl of wisdom in that idea that these things take time.
Yes.
I think, like I mentioned, I think George Goodheart was a second generation chiropractor, so he absorbed it, by osmosis, all these principles of how to help people to feel better, the chiropractic, but just bedside manner, how to take care of people, how to encourage people. And then he read widely. It wasn't just what he had, tried and true. He applied all these different things, integrated all these different things to create his system of applied kinesiology. And then in the session, he might do something completely different that he'd never done before. He was always innovating and inventing and following intuition and coming up with something new that he'd never done before. And so these things take time. When the time is right, the technique appears. And so I think that's not just a humorous response. It was like, well, this was the moment for that muscle to come into balance.
Absolutely.
This was the moment for me to discover. And I take heart at that because not everyone I ever balance notices any improvement right away, or maybe ever. But I just say, well, I'm just going to trust the process, and those who are meant to have some benefit right now, if this is right for their path, they're going to get the right amount of benefit. And I'm not going to attach my ego or my satisfaction or my self-confidence on how much benefit. And so that's been a pearl of wisdom for me that I've taken from George Goodheart. Is just everything's going to happen in its time. Trust the process, but also follow your intuition. If you're doing the same thing and it's not getting a different result, maybe it's time to try something different. It may be refer them to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. It may be go get some physical therapy, or it may be we've been doing structural and it helps, but then it's the same thing. Might we consider some emotion? Maybe that's a factor. There was another thing I wanted to say I thought about George Goodheart. Oh, yes. The intuitive part, that intuitive part. And I mentioned I did meet Goodheart as a child, and then I saw him speak 2 different times. He was given a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Energy Psychology Association here in the United States. And that's actually an exploding group that's using very basic things from kinesiology, from Goodheart, maybe from Touch for Health. Donna Eden is a big mover and shaker in that realm. And so they were recognizing him as one of the roots of their energy psychology. They're using basic energy interventions within the whole psychological approach. And so he was getting a Lifetime Achievement Award. So he gave his lecture and he told this story. And when we gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award in 2005 at John Thie's last Touch for Health conference in North Carolina, he also told this story. And in his book called You'll Be Better, he told the story. So I kind of feel like maybe this is an important story to share related to George Goodheart. So I call it the ESR story. And just briefly, he had a client come in and the client was like shaking. And he said, wow, I noticed you're shaking. He said, yeah, been shaking like this for a week. He said, wow, what happened? Something happened a week ago? He said, yeah, I was driving down the mountain and I had a trailer behind my car. And I guess I took a turn too fast. I looked in the mirror and the trailer had gone off the road. It was just out there in the sky. So I pushed on the gas, and before it fell down, it came back on the road, and no harm done. But my wife and my child were traveling in that trailer. So it really scared me, and I've been shaking ever since. And while the guy was telling this story, George Goodheart was looking at him and he said, I see two red blinking lights right here on your forehead. And being the tactile guy that he was, he said, let me touch those lights and see what's going on. Something's indicating I should touch here. And he felt a pulsation. He said, I'm not so familiar with some pulsation right here in the forehead. I don't know what that might be. So then he touched the wall. He said, well, if I still feel the pulsation, it's just my fingers. But if I don't, then there's some kind of pulsation going on here. And the time that he decided, yeah, the pulsation is in that guy's head, he turned around and the guy said, I stopped shaking. You relieved the emotional stress. And he said, wow, those are emotional stress release points. And so in those days, he had the Goodheart study group leaders, and he would record on a cassette tape, which if any of you know what that looks like, I still have one of those floating around here, although I have nothing to play it on anymore. But he would make cassette recordings and send those around the country to his Goodheart study group leaders. And at their lunches, they would get together and share what was George's latest innovations, and then they'd all try it out, and then they'd get together at the annual meeting to report what had been their results and what they had come up with.
What an amazing story. The good old ESR points.
Yeah. So, he really studied and was scientific in his approach and methodical in his approach, but he was also very intuitive and just kind of a magical healer. And I think once we get confident with our techniques, we can also be open to intuition, and it's always an adventure. Where is the session going to take us to a technique we're not using all the time, or maybe some new way to apply things to a new situation?
That's fantastic.
So my last pearl for the moment from George Goodheart that I wanted to share was the title of his book that he put out is called You'll Be Better. And it's kind of a rare book to get a hold of, but if you can find it, I don't know if there's a digital version yet. Maybe I can encourage someone to put that out there, but it's worth the read. But that title, You'll Be Better, is what that's what he used to say to finish the session. Once they'd done the session and he'd seen however much progress they'd made, as they left, he encouraged them, you'll be better. Have faith, have confidence, however much or little you've improved right now, the healing system has gotten started and you will be feeling better. So he put that as the title of his book. So I thought that was important. So I think that is an important pearl of wisdom, whether you say, you, my friend, or, say, there is hope for you. Look, your muscle got stronger. There's hope for you. It's a little bit humorous, but there's a truth in it, and it's important to reinforce. So my father, a pearl of wisdom from him is kind of the same pearl of wisdom, but the phrase he used was at the very beginning of the balance. And he would say, what do you want better in your life? Mm-hmm. And so, of course, one of my students told me that pain is a great motivator. So, what's going to keep you in business day in and day out, bread and butter, is pain and complaints and problems. So you have to respect and listen to that and give a fully in-depth feedback that you've heard people and what they're going through and what is the precise quality of the pain or emotional suffering that they're having. But you're probably going to get a better result, and you'll start getting results if appropriate, to shift to a positive focus. What do you want better in your life? If that changes your complaint, or even if it doesn't change, what would you like better in your life regardless? And sometimes people improve their positive outlook, improve their function, and the negative thing doesn't go away, doesn't change, but they're getting the positive thing that they want in their life, so they don't care as much about the complaint. And so his beginning assumption was, there's something going to improve now, and your life is going to improve. So what do you want better in your life? Let's start there. And of course, we'll help relieve aches and pains and release emotions so that you'll better be able to enjoy your life and live the life that you want to live. So it's that idea that there's always some hope, you know. And it's also funny, another funny story, one of my funny stories, and that was the Pearl of Wisdom I was trying to share before we took a little break, was my father said, collect, you know, you're just starting out. When I was just starting out at the ripe young age of 30, he said, start collecting your stories of your own experiences, but also steal the stories from everybody else, because your own stories, what you've experienced, what's real for you is gold, and everybody else, their stories are silver. And you can share those stories, and people relate to stories. Something that a human being has experienced makes it real for other people. So another thing that my father used to say is, you've switched models. And he was trying to always work in a holistic model, but people, of course, came with their complaints, their problems. And you have to respect those problems, you know, that's a great motivator. People don't come in, a lot of times people won't come in saying, I just want you to help me focus on my positive attitude and my positive direction in life. They're like, I don't need you for that. I know what that is. I don't need a coach. Just my knee hurts. So deal with my knee, fix my knee. And so he'd say, okay, well, we can work on that, but you may have switched models. You may be in the fix-it model, and I'm in the whole person balancing model. So oftentimes when he was teaching a class, people would ask all kinds of questions, and they kind of all boiled down to the different versions of the same question. What treatment will fix what condition? And he said, I'm not in a treatment fixing conditions mode. I'm not in a treatment fixing conditions model. And I'll tell you what, don't even tell me what is your problem. I'm going to tune in. You think of what is your problem, and I'll tell you what caused it. So go ahead, tell me what is your problem. Okay, I'll tell you what caused it. Life. Your life has caused this problem. Everything in your life and everything you've experienced up to this point. Life is multifactorial. So to be holistic, we can't just say, well, there's one root cause, we treat that cause, and we've cured the condition. We need to try to do something to help you come into a more holistic balance so the natural healing function is functioning, because the body always heals itself. I can be a helpful influence. I can help you, support you to get into a better state so that your energy flows, that you're feeling better emotionally, more clear mentally. So yes, I have a role, but it's always you and your own body that's doing the healing. And it's always your passion and your direction in life that's going to take you forward. So I'm here to help you with that. So if you're willing to work in that model and realize there are multiple factors that are always at play, and we'll just try to touch on some of those, and maybe some of them are more important, some are less, but by dealing with the whole person, we're probably going to get a better result right now, but especially if it's an ongoing practice of looking at all those factors and dealing with all the different factors in life. On the long run, you're going to prevent all kinds of diseases you may never have thought about, but you're also going to get a greater satisfaction in life, which is really, to me, ultimately the purpose of what we're doing. That's what you asked earlier. What is it that keeps you passionate about the work? And to me, that's what it is, that it's a work that helps people with a lot of these problems. Of course, that you might not stay in business if people don't reduce pain and feel better emotionally, but very quickly, once they get to realize what kind of transformational work it is you're doing, they get on board and their lives are transformed in small ways and in big ways. Sometimes they decide to completely change their career. They become kinesiologists, or maybe kinesiology isn't their thing, but it helps them to go find the thing that is their thing.
Yes.
And also, just I'm continuously inspired by meeting other people who've had these experiences and it's real for them. So I relearn what is Touch for Health over and over in my classes. And when I go to different places, people say, well, Matthew, what is the truth? What is the great essence of Touch for Health? And I say, well, you know what the last 5 people said about reflecting back on their experience and what they felt just now and what has been important to them? That's what it is. That's the essence. And I just hear reflected back over and over. So I'm just going to repeat what they said. And that's the great truth that I have to bring to you today. And I think I already mentioned the magic word. You know, my father was kind of old school applied kinesiology. So he could be quite firm with his touch. He could be quite firm just as a person, as a character, you know, because he was a leader type and he ran a big clinic. And so he had a lot of employees, quite frankly, who, you know, he needed to assert a certain amount of discipline among the staff and so forth. So he could be quite a firm person and he could have quite a firm touch. But even with his staff, he had meetings where they'd go around the circle and share their feelings. And so he would have a time where he would just listen to how everybody is feeling. Okay, now I've heard how all you're feeling, and now let's get back to business. But he gave people a space to speak up and even object if there's something that wasn't working for them, or mention where they're playing, or just say plain stop, you know. And if there was somebody who was working for him but who was miserable, they could come to usually a happy agreement where they say, hey, this just isn't working out for both of us, and it could end on a positive note, that it didn't have to be a negative ending of a relationship. So he always, you know, wanted to work firmly on the neurolymphatic points, but he always asked people first, do you know the magic word? And people would often say, please. And people who knew the joke would say more. But the magic word was stop. If there's anything you don't like, if I'm rubbing too hard, or I'm touching you the wrong place, or I have bad breath, or whatever it is that's bothering you, just please speak up and say stop. You have that power, you are in charge. And I think by creating that safety and giving people back their own power to be in charge of themselves and speak up for themselves, that in itself is very transformative and gave a lot of power to people. And he could have just by having that experience and all the benefit of balancing aside, people getting back in touch with their own authority for themselves and their own self-responsibility. I think in the end, maybe that's the most powerful thing.
Absolutely. These are fantastic pearls.
There was another one, the healing circle. So together with all the other things that my parents were into doing, sharing Touch for Health and applied kinesiology and all the years of chiropractic, that part of their path, their spiritual journey, is that there was this local Methodist church that they somehow felt drawn to. It was just kind of a small group, small congregation, but they felt drawn to, it was part of their mission in life to be part of this church and be part of the leadership and build up that church to be successful in the community, to be a resource for the community. Excuse me, whether it's reaching out to homeless people or meeting with other religious groups and discussing what are the issues for the community. And after he retired, my mother and he started up what they called the Prayer and Healing Circle at the local Malibu United Methodist Church. But the routine, the procedure that he did, I think can apply to it doesn't have to be in a church, it doesn't have to be religious affiliated, but in that context, together with the concept of Christian hands-on healing plus Touch for Health, they had kind of a very powerful way to get together in a circle to pray for each other's healing. But the main hands-on healing that they used was Touch for Health. And they brought in that energy model and principles from Chinese medicine. So what they used to do is just go around the circle and just briefly touch base with everybody. Hi, how are you? What's your name? So people just feel present, accepted, and heard. And then they go and get a little bit of some kind of very brief goal statement, or maybe not a goal, but a problem. What's bothering you? You have a pain in your shoulder. Okay, what's the number on the pain? And then he would balance a surrogate for everyone in the room. That one surrogate was serving as a group balance, but for each person for their own individual issues. So of course, to make sure that that was a nice grounded balancing, he would first do a full 14 muscle balance of the surrogate to make sure they were nice and clear and neutral as a surrogate, not giving their energy away or taking energy from someone else, but just that they could be neutral and reflect what was going on. So the surrogate often found, without any particular goal other than to be a neutral surrogate, they felt very much balanced and relaxed after that balance. And then just checking everybody's goal before and after balancing the surrogate, people found it was almost the same as if you balance them directly. Their neck felt better, they felt more calm. And sometimes they even did surrogate balances, the people in the circle, for somebody who wasn't even there. and then they call that person later, because in the Christian tradition, there's nothing strange about doing a balancing for someone or saying a prayer for someone at a distance, somebody who's not physically, there's something to having them physically present. And so the circle was great. Let's get together in the circle and let's have our combined energy. And there's a power in that. But you can also do, and we're finding now, or I always knew this, but I'm kind of required to rediscover and appreciate that over Zoom, even though Touch for Health, I'd love to have you physically present and be able to physically touch, we can do a lot just by speaking with each other and directing, coaching people to rub their own points. And even at a distance, we can have fantastic balance.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, we're finding that's the way we're working at the moment.
So I'm always going to advocate let's human beings get together, whether in a circle or in pairs, and actually get that benefit of human touch, because I think just the fact of human touch, people getting together for the purpose of their health with respect, without trying to take some sexual advantage or some punishment, but for health, for the purpose of health, that in the safety and non-judgmental is very powerful. Just the fact that we get together and touch. But I think the fact that the silver lining of rediscovering that we can also do things at the distance gives us more options and makes what we're doing more accessible. So this year, I'm probably going to be doing more with the online stuff. I'm looking forward to be able to get back together with people in person, actually physically touching. But I think we're going to be doing both things more and being able to share with more people around the world.
Absolutely. Could you tell us a little bit about Sandy? Because we all loved and missed Sandy. And I know you were very good friends with her.
Sandy Gannon, I didn't even know until after she had passed away. A little bit like with George Goodheart, I attended his funeral and I was pretty amazed at not only was he this brilliant innovator and shared all these techniques around the world and this really humorous, fun-loving guy, but he was a great family man. And his family just really felt like he was part of the family and there for them. He was a great community guy. Everybody knew him in the community. He wasn't just sharing what he was doing in kinesiology, but he was part of the community. Whatever was needed to be done in the community, he was active in his local community, which was kind of also part of my father's secret to success as a chiropractor, that he stayed in the same community for 35 years. So any promotion he was doing was always building up and building up. He had loyalty for 35 years of what he was doing. So nothing he did was ever lost. But when after Sandy so suddenly passed away, and that was really actually quite hard for me personally, because Sandy has been kind of a mentor to me at different points, especially with working within the IKC. And she had just taken on the title, even though she kind of was behind the scenes, even when she wasn't officially the president, she was kind of behind the scenes, keeping things in order, keeping things together, working without any title or recognition, but really putting in a lot of work. She had just retaken the title, and I was saying, okay, we're in good hands with Sandy. And then she was robbed from us. And that was very hard for me to take. It was reminding me kind of, I could have definitely used my father around for another 10 years, but he was the kind of guy who worked 16 hours a day. And so maybe he got in a whole life's work by the time he was 73. But I would have loved to have him around longer and Sandy around longer. And it was also hard for me because it wasn't that long before that we suddenly lost another member who was like a big brother to me in the kinesiology world, Juan Carlos Monge, who with his wife Francesca Simeon founded the Vida Kinesiology Center. I don't know whether I want to speak Spanish or English, in Barcelona. And he suddenly died. And we had worked together very closely on a bunch of projects. So it was a big impact. I think I'm still just still coping with the fact that we've lost Sandy. It feels like just yesterday. But one of the pearls of wisdom that I took from Sandy, and let me just check my notes here. Oh yeah, well, one of them was a quote that she took from my father, that he didn't necessarily emphasize in all of his workshops, all of his classes, but I think in particular, I'm not sure why, what was the spirit of the particular workshop that she attended, but she was one of those people that even though she was an expert in kinesiology, Chinese medicine, Touch for Health especially, teaching instructors, she made the pilgrimage to Malibu and attended his intensive Touch for Health 1 through 4, maybe it was even only 1 through 3 intensive clinical workshop just to see, well, how is he working now and what was he emphasizing? And one of the main things she got out of that was the phrase he used to use, "You, my friend." And so she used to use that with me sometimes. She'd just grab me and say, "You, my friend." And, after hours out of workshop, Sandy was a very gregarious person. And I think maybe I had more benefit from Sandy just as a friend to hang around with at kinesiology workshops and just enjoy life. She was a person who had a joie de vivre, and that she knew how to enjoy her life. And that spilled over to me. I enjoyed my life more because I knew Sandy. But it's an interesting thing that my father would actually praise people for getting better. And it's, in a way, it's a little bit of a clinical no-no that you don't, tell people that it's their job to please you and feel better so that you'll be happy. But he wasn't afraid to do that. He said, "It's okay if you feel better just to make me happy." And I think a lot of people enjoyed that. They actually did feel better because they were making him happy. And then they felt like they were doing a good service by getting better and enjoying their lives more and making John Thie happy. So that was what he often said at the end of a workshop, at the end of a session, when people said, "Oh, I feel better. Oh, that pain's gone." He said, "You, my friend, you just proved again this thing I've dedicated my life to is worthwhile. It's helpful. It helped you. Great. Now you're my friend."
I love that. That's brilliant.
But
So
I just want to say one other thing about Sandy was I knew that she was a leader in the IKC and in Touch for Health. And I knew that she also had her own workshops that she was a leader in that way. And I had the privilege also to, stay at her home a few times and get to know a little bit some of her family members. And I saw that she was like George Goodheart she was really there for her family, even though she was this internationally known person and big leader, important person, she was probably the most important person in her family. She was there for her family and looking after all the different people there. But then when I was on the memorial, the video, we had to have the memorial by video, but that was great because it made it easy for me to come. It might have been hard for me to come all the way to England, although I would have wanted to. I was just amazed again at how many people she had personally touched their lives and made a big difference and been a transformational influence in their lives.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That's a lovely tribute to Sandy, I think.
Oh, I remembered another thing about Sandy. And maybe actually, even though it's some of these pearls of wisdom, I think they are pearls of wisdom, but sometimes it is easier said than done, but it's still worth knowing and trying it out and practice. And so I mentioned that within the IKC, she was very much in different leadership roles. At one point, I was really putting in the effort to be on the committees, and for a time, I was even president of the International Kinesiology College, and she was kind of someone who supported me and helped me working in that role. And at a certain point, I asked her, I said, "Well, when you're in any leadership role, a lot of times it feels like people are just attacking you personally. They disagree with an idea, or it's not even your idea, but you end up taking the attack just because you've mentioned what the idea is for discussion. And it feels like a personal attack." I said, "How do you deal with that?" Sandy said, "Oh, well, I'm tough as old boots." And she used a more colorful phrase, but I'll translate it into polite internet language. "I am not overly concerned about other people's judgmental opinions about me personally." Her phrase was a little different, but the same meaning. And so I thought that was an important lesson. I kind of wish I'd gotten it earlier because I think I would have not internalized some of my emotional taking things personally with some of this committee work that I've done. But, I take that forward as a pearl of wisdom. I'm always looking for who can serve on the board, who's willing to be on the committee, because our Touch for Health Association for over 20 years has continued as just a total volunteer board. It's just through volunteer hours that we've continued, and the show has gone on year after year. So I tried to pass that pearl on to say, yeah, okay, let's try to be just neutral about these things and not take any of it personal. That's not necessarily easy to do, but at least we can have the idea and use some of our tools and realize, okay, going from a session where everything is so beautiful and supportive and non-judgmental to just kind of the next level and trying to organize and share this information. Maybe it's a business discussion with your promotional partner. Suddenly it's not a non-judgmental session where someone's just listening to you in a totally servant mode. There can be some conflict. So it's good for us to know that, okay, yes, it's natural in life. Life isn't a balance. Life isn't receiving a session. Life has all kinds of challenges. And so let's remember our tools. Let's remember there are some things we can do, and maybe not necessarily take all these things so personally. Take a step back, breathe, get into balance, and focus on what is it you want to achieve, and not the personal part necessarily.
Brilliant. Very good advice.
And just to kind of come to the end, a couple of my own pearls of wisdom, without going into the 2 pages of text I have here. Like I said in the beginning, you said, how did I get into this? And when I started speaking at conferences, I said, I can go back to basics and just talk about the self-responsibility mode, because it sounds like a lot of people, when they're teaching these new techniques, they're kind of saying, oh, when you have this condition, this is the technique that will treat that condition. And I said, oh, that's not really the model I grew up with. That's especially in Touch for Health, because we're coming from applied kinesiology, where they are licensed to diagnose. And so they're actually legally required to have a diagnosis and a treatment plan. And what is the condition? And how are you going to treat it? They said, hey, we maybe shouldn't share this Touch for Health stuff, because people are going to start doing a muscle test and diagnosing you have this condition to that condition based on a muscle test, which is just not accurate. You need all that diagnostic information of a physician if you're going to work in that mode of using medical language and medical diagnosis. So in Touch for Health, we've been very almost religious about the idea we're not working in that model. We've repeated over and over, working in the holistic, postural balancing, energy balancing model. And so, and since we're working in that model, we don't have to feel that great responsibility on our shoulders that we have to fix people, that we have to make everything better all at once. It's fine for us to do just a little something to help people a little bit further along their path, just a little bit to help release a burden or relieve a pain. So my pearl of wisdom is KISS. Keep it simple, sweetheart. So, and more over the years, and I think his name was Anthony Attenborough. Have you heard that name?
Yes.
So I met him at a workshop. It was one of the early times when I gave a speech at a conference. It was a conference, I think it was in Kiel, England. And I sat in on one of his breakout workshops where he was doing something he called muscle listening. And going through that muscle listening, I thought, that's very fascinating. You just go through the range of motion and listen to your own energy and do some visualization. And that in itself is very profound energy work. So I said, this guy seems like a real wizard. I want to go have a session with him. And so in that session, he said to me, he had a kind of a prophecy. He said, oh, Matthew, it's great that you're here, because you are going to have an importance in the future. All right, we got nervous. What is he going to say? He said, yeah, you are going to make Touch for Health even simpler and make things even more easy to access. And so ever since then, I've been waiting for that grand moment when I achieve that great dream, but I've been working towards it ever since. And it does seem to be my natural progression, that the cutting edge for me is always to go one step simpler. do something even shorter, even easier. But what is the magic formula that makes whatever you do, however simple it is, still something deep and profound? And I was really gratified. I enjoyed so much the interview with Natalie Davenport, but I heard her say it during her conversation, and I heard her end her speech with that pearl of wisdom of listen to the person. If the person feels respected and heard, you've gone 90% of the way to doing your job to support them in their healing. And that's definitely my pearl of wisdom. I've got that, and I collect that pearl of wisdom from almost all the biggies, the great gurus in kinesiology. If you listen to them and you hear, they almost all will say that in some way or another. Kenichi Ishimaru from Japan teaches something called Zen kinesiology. And Zen kinesiology starts out with just listen. If that's your only job and your whole job, that's a great job. He goes so far in the exercise, when he says just listen, he means don't do anything else. Keep your mouth shut and listen. So you're only allowed to express with your eyes and your facial expressions that you're hearing and appreciating what the people are saying, because I don't know if it's more Japanese culture or another culture, but he says people just love to give advice. And as soon as you've said 3 words, they say, oh, I know what you've got to do. This is what you should do. Do this, do that, and now pay me my money. I've told you how to fix your life. He said, don't do that. Don't give any advice, no judgment, no opinion. If you do that with love and respect, then you will be helping humanity. Not just that person, but the whole world step towards the harmony that we need to heal the planet.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. That's a great note.
I'm sorry, I have one more.
Oh, you're ruining my endings.
Because it's. I'm sure I heard my father say this too. I'm sure I heard a lot of it, but I kind of feel like I own it so much in my own experience that it's sort of like my own truth. It's my own pearl. So my phrase is take it easy. And I've used that philosophy throughout my life. I mean, I learned from my father. He worked so hard. And of course, he loved that. He was that's how he enjoyed life. And he worked real hard. And that was great. But I also learned that there are other ways. He said, I can take you out to this lobster dinner. It's very expensive. It's the most expensive thing on the menu. So you better get a high degree and a very high paying job so you can afford this expensive life. I got the opposite lesson. I said, you mean if I don't order lobster and I don't go to the most expensive restaurants, I can live cheap and I don't have to work too hard? That sounds good to me. I mean, I grew up on the beach in Malibu. So I don't know, maybe in a past life, I worked really, really hard. Because in my life, I don't know why, but I'm usually looking for when is my next chance to just take a rest, put my feet up and enjoy the sunset. So it's one of those advice to people to say, well, how would you be enjoying your life? You know, a lot of people say, balance me to make more money. I said, great, but what for? You know, it was like, I lived in New Orleans for a while, and that city is famous for their beautiful, grand old mansions in the Garden District. And one day I came up to the guy in his backyard. I said, wow, that's a beautiful house. He was working on his garden. They had these beautiful gardens. That's such a beautiful house. He said, yeah. Do I own the house or does the house own me? I said, whoa. What a different perspective. So ever since that time, my house in Los Angeles, I think to me, it's a grand mansion, but on the grand scheme of things, it's a pretty small doll's house. And I spent plenty of energy keeping up that house, but it's plenty of house for me. I'm satisfied and I'm happy with a house that doesn't take up my whole life, with a practice that does leave me time as an introvert to do quiet time, alone time, self-charging time. So it's kind of my general advice to everybody, take it easy. Find the time that you can recharge, however it is that you recharge. but also in my experience of doing sessions. I mentioned most of my sessions are teaching sessions in, intensive clinical workshops. We work on everybody as the way we teach the information. So they get their transformation while they learn the techniques, and the techniques are more meaningful that way. But one of my best clients is my mother-in-law. And she's my best client, not because she pays me. Well, she makes me chile relleno and wonderful things like that. So we have our wonderful family exchange, but she doesn't pay me any cash. But she's my best client because the simplest things are amazingly effective with her. Mm. And she's not one of these people who's really into alternative medicine or any of these woo-woo things. The first time I balanced some muscles with her, she said, "That's what you do? Okay. Thanks." And she left, and she wasn't really very much impressed. But I was a little bit impressed that we could only test 3 muscles, because just going through the range of motion was quite painful. And then when I rubbed the points, she nearly jumped out of her shirt, because barely touching the neurolymphatic point was already so tender. So I just barely touched it very lightly. I said, "That's painful?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, that's probably enough." And then when we checked, she could go better through the range of motion and tolerate a little pressure. And after 3 muscles, I said, "That's probably enough for now." I don't want to make it worse. I don't want to exacerbate it. And she left, and she told me later, she said, "Well, I thought that was," can I say the word bullshit?
You can.
She said, "I didn't think that was worth anything." I said, "Well, but your arms did feel a little bit better. I mean, that was impressive to me. They were so painful, and then it improved the range of motion." She said, "No, I didn't believe in it at all." But she said the next day, my whole body felt better. I felt so much more comfortable. I was amazed. So I said, "Okay, I want to go back and do that." So over the years working, we can do a 14 muscle balance so easily. She doesn't have pain going through all those. She's years older, but she has much more flexibility. I haven't cured all of her medical conditions. She has her challenges. She has her good days and bad days. But every time we go through a 14 muscle balance, I say, "Isn't that amazing?" Before, remember when we started, it was so painful just to do this range of motion. Now you can do that range of motion, and we can find where our muscle's out of balance, and we balance it. And then 6, 8 days, 2 weeks, you're feeling fine. We do a little something, check ranges of motion in the wrist, just trace the meridians, recheck, you feel better for days at a time. That's amazing. I'm still amazed. But there's a little risk. I say, my father always used to say, the public does not need protection from a 14 muscle balance. It's not dangerous. The public needs access to a 14 muscle balance. But that's a whole other lecture. But I've had this with my mother-in-law. And then, of course, she started bringing her friends. So a whole series of elderly women from the community where she lives, and they come and we do a little something. Maybe they feel something in the moment, but strangely, sometimes these things take time. So it's been like not so unusual that nothing much happens in the moment, except, muscles seem to improve, some decrease in pain, but they're usually not that impressed. But then 1 day later, 2 days later, they feel much better. But then what happens? They go out dancing. They haven't been dancing in 30 years. They go dancing, and the next day, they feel much worse than when we started. I feel, "Oh no, what did I do?" So I say, take it easy. Now I'm learning to say that at the end of every balance. "Okay, you feel better? Take it easy." Don't immediately rush right back out onto the football field and re-injure. The body yes, you're in a more balanced state. The body is healing. The pain reduces because maybe you don't need that signal to tell you to take it easy. But since you don't have the signal, take it easy. Give it some time to heal. If you're going to go back to physical activities, little by little, start walking 5 minutes, then maybe 10 minutes. If 10 minutes you get some pain, go back to 5 minutes. So that's my final pearl of wisdom. That's my philosophy in life. Take it easy, don't overtax yourself. Of course, if what you enjoy is working and working 16 hours a day, enjoy your life, but also find how are you going to, when you're enjoying your passion, also find your time to recharge. And after any balance, you might need some time to let that integrate. These things can take some time. So keep your eyes open. Expect some improvement, maybe some changes. When you change your attitude, you haven't done some voodoo to try to change other people, but it's fascinating how other people you perceive them differently. How you think they feel about you or how they treat you seems different once you're in a different balance. So give it a chance, give it some time, and take it easy.
Take it easy. I can buy into that philosophy.
And I'm sure I have more in the paper, but people can read the paper. We'll leave it
I don't know whether to finish or not. Oh, Matthew, it's morning where you are, it's evening here. It's been such a fascinating evening being in your company. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's been fun sharing my stories. And thank you guys for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you very much.
That job must be sometimes a bit taxing.
It has its moments.
So, hey, if you ever need a balance, I'm here for you.
Thanks very much, Matthew. Cheers.
I'm as close as a Zoom call.